You like your style, don't you?
At KBLA Talk 1580, we are unapologetic about amplifying the voices of those who have historically been left out of the conversation. As we approach our 3rd anniversary this summer, the problem with talk radio in Southern California specifically, and America more broadly, is virtually unchanged. All day, all night, all white. We make no apologies for our prime audience, but true to the best of our tradition, we're committed to expanding justice and freedom for all. So when we receive messages from listeners like Neil, we just smile.
I realize that I'm not your target demographic, but I love listening to your station as it is the only progressive station on the dial.
That's us. Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Live from historic Leimert Park in Los Angeles, California, I'm Tavis Smiley, and I'm so glad to see you and me back in stride again. Before we get started with today's show, let me invite you to follow me on Facebook and Instagram at The Real Tavis Smiley and get updates on X, that's formerly Twitter, at Tavis Smiley. By the way, should you miss any part of today's program or want to catch up on previous shows, you can always visit TheTavisSmileyShow.com. That's TheTavisSmileyShow.com, or wherever you get your podcast, and listen to the Tavis Smiley podcast version of this program at your leisure. Another great show on tap for you today. In our second hour, 2 conversations. Up first, we'll speak with the former governor of Ohio, Dick Celeste. Governor Celeste is also a former ambassador to India and former Peace Corps director, so he has a wealth of knowledge. But while governor of the Buckeye State, he commuted 8 death row inmates. 8 death row inmates he commuted, and says that in retrospect, not abolishing the death penalty is his biggest regret as governor. Now, put a pin in that for just a moment until I tell you about Hour 3's conversation in a moment. On the B side of Hour 2, a conversation about the ways in which these massive media layoffs are disproportionately affecting journalists of color. It's not just the Los Angeles Times, although it pains one to see what's really going on there. You know the old adage, last hired, first fired. We'll talk about it with Hana Tamiz, writer and editor, currently working for the Neiman Journalism Lab, at Harvard University. That's on the backside of Hour 2. In our third hour, you all heard about Alabama inmate Kenneth Smith, the first death row inmate known to be executed by nitrogen gas, marking the emergence of a wholly new method of capital punishment. Smith had survived Alabama's initial attempt to execute him by lethal injection, I can't talk today, back in 2022. But experts have said that this new method could lead to excessive pain and even torture for those sentenced to death. As you well know, there is a disproportionate number of black and brown fellow citizens sitting on death row right now in this country. And so we will unpack the meaning of all this with Williams College professor Dr. Joy James in Hour 3. But in this first hour today,
the court considers that, with regard to the present situation, Israel must, in accordance with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, in relation to Palestinians in Gaza, take all measures within its power to prevent the commission of all acts within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention, in particular, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, and D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. The Court recalls that these acts fall within the scope of Article 2 of the Convention when they are committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part the group as such. The Court is also of the view that Israel must take measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip.
That was the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, the UN's top court. It has now ordered Israel to prevent genocide in Gaza, but stop short of ordering a ceasefire. Please be joined now by the noted public intellectual, author, professor, bookstore owner, and Mark Lamont Hill YouTube channel host, Mark Lamont Hill. Mark, how are you today, sir?
I am good, my brother. Happy New Year to you, man. It's so good to hear your voice.
Happy New Year to you. My first time talking to you this year. It's good to hear your voice and delighted, of course, to have you back on this program. So I just played, as you heard for the audience, a soundbite of the ICJ and its ruling on Friday, again, suggesting or saying, ordering, in fact, Israel to not engage in genocide. But stopping short of calling for a ceasefire. Before we jump into this conversation, there are a lot of pieces to this. It's not just what's happening in Israel and Palestine. There's a huge article you probably saw yesterday in the New York Times about hundreds of black faith leaders and what they're saying and doing about this huge article in the Times yesterday, the New York Times. We're going to talk about that piece. We'll talk about 3 U.S. soldiers who were killed in Jordan in a drone attack that the U.S. says was launched by some Iran-backed militia. President Biden has said he will respond in our own place, our own time, in our own way, but be sure we are going to respond. That means we risk widening this war depending on what President Biden does. So there are a lot of other tentacles. There's a food shortage right now. Another major story out today, there is hunger. There's a hunger crisis in Gaza. They are calling it a humanitarian calamity because of the blockade. Food is not getting now to Palestinians, and they are dying. They are starving. Many of them are now eating animal feed, we are told, just to survive. So there's a lot of tentacles that offshoot this story. Watching my clock now, Mark, I lied. Let me ask you to hold 1 second now that I've set the frame for all that we want to talk about in this hour. And then there's more. But that's the frame that we're in. So there's new news, disturbing news today about what's happening in Israel and Hamas. Between Israel and Hamas, I should say, and that decision by the ICJ on Friday is resonating. People are talking about it. What does it really mean? Do they have the power to actually enforce that? Is it a joke? Is it a mockery? What do we make of the UN's High Court saying no genocide, but coming short of calling for a ceasefire? Is that like oxymoronic? Okay, we'll talk about it. Our guest is Mark Lamont Hill. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
From Leimert Park with love, this is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
What's up? I'm Danelle Riley, FAMU alumni and creator of the HBCU Culture Shop. I am so proud of my new partnership with Black Beyond Measure and Target. They help me elevate community pride with my HBCU designs and continue to support Black creators and entrepreneurs with Target HBCU challenges, scholarship programs, and campus collaborations. Let's come together this homecoming season and beyond. Shop my brand and discover other Black-owned products at target.com/BlackBeyondMeasure.
Ew, gotta get rid of this old Backstreet Boys t-shirt.
Tell me why.
Because it stinks, boys.
Tell me why.
I've washed it so many times, but the odor won't come out.
Tell me why.
No, you tell me why I can't get rid of this odor.
Have you tried Downy Rinse and Refresh? It doesn't just cover up odors, it helps remove them.
Wow, it worked, guys.
Yeah.
Downy Rinse and Refresh removes more odor in 1 wash than the leading value detergent in 3 washes. Find it wherever you buy laundry products.
If you love to travel, Capital One has a rewards credit card that's perfect for you. With Venture X, earn unlimited double miles on everything you buy and turn everyday purchases into extraordinary trips. Plus, receive premium travel benefits like access to over 1,300 airport lounges where you just check in and chill out. Open up a world of possibilities with Capital One. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. Lounge access is subject to change. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Eggs are a staple in our diets, and there's only one egg with more delicious farm-fresh taste plus superior nutrition. Eggland's Best. With more vitamins, including 6 times more vitamin D and 10 times more vitamin E, plus 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. Available in so many delicious varieties: classic, cage-free, and organic. Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
Let's get started with Mark Lamont Hill right now. Mark, good to have you on the program. So I tried to set the frame for this. We'll walk through it one piece at a time. But let me just start, though, getting your thoughts on this big story that broke on Friday. The ICJ demanding that Israel not engage in genocide, but stopping short of calling for a ceasefire. How'd you read that?
I read that as powerful a decision as we could have imagined. And for our audience that's listening here, I want them to really appreciate not just the power of it, but the beauty of it, that South Africa, a nation with such a deep and painful history of racial apartheid, of genocide, of violence, of ethnic cleansing, of all the things, stood up in solidarity with the Palestinian people and took a Western nation, I'm using Western in quotes here, but effectively a Western nation, certainly a first world and powerful nation, to the international court. You know, we often talk about the difference between being a wounded herder and a wounded healer. You know, you have nations like Germany that have tried to atone for its awful actions in the Nazi Holocaust by shielding Israel, by shielding the Jewish state from accountability. And then you got South Africa. It says we're going to account for our ugly history, not by shielding the victims and allowing the victims to be herders, but instead forcing everybody to be accountable and to produce justice. And when we saw that court decision, 16-1, 15-2 on these various measures, that tells you a lot. I mean, other than Uganda, which we can talk about later, just about every nation except Israel, who has a spot on the court, stood up and said that there needs to be accountability for this. Now, I think you're right. It is noteworthy that they didn't say ceasefire, but I believe that that's more of a procedural matter than it is an ideological one. And I'll be specific about that. What the court said, because I want people to understand what the court said. The court said that they disregarded or dismissed Israel's claim that South Africa didn't have the standing to make the claim. They acknowledged that there was a dispute. They acknowledged that they did have jurisdiction, and they acknowledged prima facie, that means on its face, that there is a plausible case for genocide. It would be like if I were in a court in L.A. and I were being arraigned for bank robbery, and they looked at and I'm saying my lawyer's like, no, drop the charges. Y'all ain't got no case. And the prosecution's like, well, look at the camera. That's Mark Lamont. He got a Mark Lamont Hill official YouTube T-shirt on. Look at him. That's him. That's him. We ain't saying you did it, but there's enough evidence to say that you might have did it, and that we can proceed with the hearing. That's what Friday was about. They were saying it's plausible that there's genocide here. They even went so far as to quote Israeli officials and Israeli spokespeople and said, "Look, y'all said this. It's plausible." But the reason why they didn't say a ceasefire then, which is a great question that everyone's asking, is, I think, a technical one, and one that I think Israel raised quite masterfully, and that is Hamas was not party to these proceedings. Mm-hmm. Hamas was not party to the ruling. Therefore, if they would have called for a ceasefire, Israel's point was, we would be legally bound to not fire a weapon, and Hamas could keep firing without being in violation of the law. And so you would be effectively disarming us. So basically, what the court, even in self-defense, so what the court said was, okay, we're not going to tell you to the ceasefire. What we are going to say is, here are all the things you can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And in that soundbite that you played, Tavis, all the things they said you couldn't do are literally quotes, word for word, from the UN Conventions on Genocide. So they said, look, we're not saying you committed genocide, but these are the 4 things genocide are, and don't do none of them.
Mm-hmm.
And send us a regular report demonstrating how you're not doing genocide.
Yeah.
I don't get no better than that.
Yeah, I could read this. I could read this as a victory for Israel. I don't need to unpack that with you. If I say to you, I read this, Mark Lamont Hill, as a victory for Israel, you'd respond how?
It's certainly a public. I wouldn't call it a victory, but it's certainly a point.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly got a shot in there. You know what I mean? It wasn't a knockout. And it gives them public relations room to say, see, the court had the opportunity to say ceasefire, but they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. But I think that was the court being principled. But it doesn't negate the fact that all of the things they told Israel not to do, Israel is doing, and therefore, if they have to still stop doing them if they were to be in compliance with the court.
Yep. You singled out Uganda a moment ago. Explain to the audience why you did that.
The judge from Uganda was the only judge. When you look at all the rulings about in the emergency measures, about the plausibility, all the measures, the court had 17 judges, and they all ruled in favor of these measures. The one dissenting judge out of the 17, other than Israel's own judge, which you would expect,
mm-hmm.
is Judge Julia Sebutinde from Uganda. She basically sided with Israel on all 6 measures adopted by the court. Now, it's worth noting that the Ugandan government said that that's her own opinion, and they do not reflect the opinions of the court.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a coincidence. They did that wasn't just a pro forma thing. They made a statement saying basically like, that ain't us. Now, why she made that decision, I don't know. But there are arguments about why Uganda might make that decision. Countries with their own histories of genocide and violence often don't want to be on the record establishing precedents that they themselves then can't meet later.
Yeah. Point. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. I take your point though. That was a very practical decision.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
If my wife started talking about something, man, so-and-so ain't take out the trash, her husband ain't take out the trash, man, I would leave my husband if he didn't take out. I don't say nothing, because there's a good chance in the next 2 weeks the trash ain't getting taken out. So I ain't saying nothing. Yeah,
I understand. Let me circle back right quick, because I want to cover more ground here. Let me circle back, though, to the point you made that I think is a powerful point. And I'm not going to say I was shocked, but it got my attention. And I found myself in conversation with a number of people when this came to the fore. As a matter of fact, my producers have been in contact with, we've been on the phone trying to work out a time. Obviously, there's a huge time difference, huge time gap. We're trying to work out a conversation with the lawyer who represented South Africa in this case. I want to get him on this program. We're almost there, just trying to find the time. It's a huge time difference between here and South Africa, but we're working on that, trying to get him on this program. I want to hear directly from him why he, on behalf of South Africa, brought this case. But I want to just go back to the point you make, because you ran through it, and that's cool. But I want to go back now, because it meant something to me. It said something to me that of all the nations in the world, it was South Africa who brought this case. Tell me more about how you read that.
I read it first. I read it through the lens of a tradition. There's a long-standing tradition of black folk, brown folk, third world folk struggling together. And at a moment where people try to tell us how divided we are and how different we are and how uninterested we are in each other's struggle, it was a beautiful moment to see something that begins in the 50s in the Bandung Conference, with the non-aligned movement, where people who weren't first world nations, where people who weren't European nations said, we got to stick together. It's what Malcolm X was talking about in Message to the Grassroots in 63. Is this idea that, hey, we got to be together here, we got to struggle together, and we got to organize together, we got to build together to imagine a different kind of possibility for what the world could look like. To me, this was an extension of that tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I also saw, again, a nation that had just wrestled with its own tortured history, and it's still wrestling with. South Africa ain't nowhere near perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, apartheid is over, but who got the land, who got the power, who got the buildings is a whole lot different than who got the presidency.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm not romanticizing South Africa, but what South Africa said is we've seen this before. We know what this is, and it's especially important because when 18 human rights organizations came out and said that Israel was an apartheid state, a lot of people from Alan Dershowitz to members of the Knesset in Israel said it is insulting to compare what's happening in Israel to apartheid South Africa. Well, now South Africa is saying, you know what, this is looking real familiar.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell them they got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sends a message that way as well, you know? I think it's a powerful message. And then finally, again, I think, again, the idea of saying, look, we're going to respond to our tortured history by not by it's like an absentee daddy to come back home. You know what I mean? You can be sometimes you think the way to be a good dad now is to let your kids do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a way of making up for it. That's not you ain't doing your kids no favors.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, Germany's approach has been to effectively shield Israel from all accountability in the international forum. Same thing the United States does. South Africa said, no, the moral thing to do is to say never again, to never allow anybody to be victim to what we were victim to and what black South Africans were victim to. Nobody should go through this. And that's what we saw in the court on Friday.
Yeah. It struck me for a number of reasons, not the least of which, and you've kind of you teed this up nicely, not the least of which is a reminder of who we are as African people at our best. I mean, all of the diaspora, who we are at our best. Here these South Africans are, to your point, who recognize very clearly what's happening in Palestine because it happened to them during apartheid. And of all the nations in the world, they are the ones who step up and say, we will not let this happen on our watch. It looks awfully familiar, quoting Mark Lamont Hill. And so we're gonna step up and we're gonna speak out about this, and we're gonna take this to the ICJ and see if we can't make a case here. It reminds me of the same thing here stateside. I made the point a few weeks ago on this program, maybe a week or two ago on this program, that this country is asking black folk once again, Joe Biden is begging black folk once again, not just to save his candidacy, but to save this democracy. Time and time again, black folk have been called upon throughout history to help save this democracy, sometimes from itself. And so everybody knows that Biden is begging black folk to get in line. The South Carolina primary is days away from now, and everybody's turning to black folk. Everybody's scared about whether black folk are going to turn out for Joe Biden. Can he pull the black vote? Are his numbers soft? Are black men going to desert him and go to Donald Trump in the 20th percentile? Everybody's focusing on this black vote. Why? Because we are always the ones who've been the conscience of this country and indeed the globe. And we're the ones who time and time again are asked to save the democracy as we are now from authoritarianism and potential anarchy if Donald Trump gets reelected. It's a powerful story, again, Mark, of who we are, I believe, at our best.
You put it perfectly. I mean, I can't say no better. I can't even add nothing to that. I mean, that's the beauty of it. That's who we are at our best. And it ain't, like you said, it ain't domestic. It's international. Yeah. It's who African people are. I love it.
Yep. Let me get back to the Middle East right quick before I move forward. So the UN High Court, its highest court, had this decision to make on Friday. Everybody in the world talking about that news. On the other side, the UN is in some trouble because we are told by Israel that some of their employees, some UN employees, participated in the October 7th attacks. And that information has been found credible by the United States, by Germany, and other countries who sided with Israel on that particular issue. That's a little messy for the UN, Mark, that some of their people may have been involved in helping Hamas on October 7th.
It's messy, and the timing is questionable. And the timing is questionable. So to give people context, the United Nations has been critical of Israel in multiple moments. And Israel's position is that the United Nations, like Amnesty International, like Human Rights Watch, like B'Tselem, which is their own Israeli human rights organization, basically they think any international body, almost every international body, I've never heard them say that anybody that is critical of them is not anti-Semitic and fundamentally against the state of Israel. And they have maintained that the UN is corrupt and that it does not deserve any kind of standing. So they begin from that premise. When they've been brought to court before, in fact, they often don't even show up, or they'll show up to one phase and that they don't show up to the next phase because they don't even want to honor the UN. So what they've done with this release of information on the same day that they get held accountable in international court is make people question the legitimacy of the United Nations in and of itself with a very sketchy claim. But I'm going to assume, for the sake of this conversation anyway, that everything they said is true. Let's say that there are 12 employees who are involved or connected to the October 7th attacks. That would be an awful thing. That would be horrible, indefensible, inexcusable. But we have to understand what it means to be an employee of they're not UN employees, they're UNRWA employees. So UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Works Agency, is an organization, a refugee organization that was created in 1948, really 1949, and was put into power in 1951. And the purpose of UNRWA was to deal with the 700,000 to 800,000 Palestinians who were expelled from Israel when Israel was created. Suddenly, you had 800,000 Palestinians who were in tents, who were on the ground, who were in dirt, who were rendered homeless in violation of all international law. And UNRWA has become the primary, if not exclusive, way that Palestinians who were descendants of those people and from the 1967 war and in Gaza get food, clothing, and shelter. It's the way that UNRWA runs the schools, UNRWA runs the hospitals, UNRWA runs the social service agencies. They make sure people get loans. UNRWA is everything to Palestinians who live in refugee camps, who live in the West Bank, who are anybody who's been dispossessed. And so UNRWA is not a small thing. There are 30,000 employees in UNRWA. 30,000 of them. Most of them, I believe 98 or 99% of them on the ground are local Palestinians. So yes, it is possible that of the 30,000 people,
there's some crossover here.
That 12 of them might have done something wrong. Yeah, that's entirely possible. But the U.S.'s response is to say, well, yeah, we think the 12 did something, so we're going to cut off UNRWA funding, which means we're going to cut off funding for everybody. I mean, the only comparison I can say is if Joe Biden tomorrow or the Congress tomorrow found out that a couple hundred people were committing welfare fraud in L.A. and they decided to cut welfare off in WIC and SNAP
for everybody,
for everybody, and say, well, because there's corruption. And I'm going to take it one step further because they say, I heard today people say, well, there's a percentage of them that have terrorist ties. That would be like saying in L.A., 10% of people on welfare, we find that 10% of people who get public assistance have a gang tie. Now, what does a gang tie mean? Does it mean you got a cousin that's in a gang?
Hold that thought. Hold that thought. He's warming up. When we come forward, I'll let him finish that thought. Remember where you are, Mark Lamont, here about do you have a cousin in the gang? You're making the point brilliantly, and I want you to finish that. There's a lot more to get to, including now starvation in Gaza and the fact that Joe Biden has said he will, in fact, retaliate for 3 U.S. soldiers killed in the Middle East this weekend. Is this war about to get wider? Our guest is Mark Lamont Hill. You're listening to him right now, and I'm glad about it, on Tavis Smiley.
Unapologetically progressive. Unapologetically black. You're tapped into Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Iran is denying any involvement in the attack on a U.S. outpost in Jordan that killed 3 American service members. An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman told state media the various groups backed by Tehran in the Middle East do not take direct orders from Iran. Officials claim Tehran had no link or connection to the attack on the facility near Jordan's border with Syria. A trial date has been set for a lawsuit filed by the family of African-American Tyree Nichols against the city of Memphis, Tennessee. Robon Wells, Nichols' mother, filed a $550 million civil lawsuit after her son was beaten by Memphis police officers and died. A trial is now scheduled for January 27th of 2025. Wells is being represented by African-American attorney Ben Crump. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Staples Print Big Sale means the more you print, the more you save. Get $20 off your print purchase of $100 or more, $50 off your print purchase of $200 or more, and $100 off your print purchase of $300 or more. Ends 2/10/24. See staples.com/print for details. Print more, save more at Staples.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Both of LA's NBA teams are on the road today. The Lakers are at Houston. The Lakers are over 500 for the first time since December 30th. 5 p.m. tip-off in Houston. The Clippers are in Cleveland. Game 3 of a 7-game Eastern road trip. The Clippers have won 5 straight. They are just 1 game behind Oklahoma City and Minnesota for the best record in the Western Conference. 4 p.m. tip-off in Cleveland. The Kansas City Chiefs are in the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year. They beat Baltimore to win the AFC title. The Chiefs will play the 49ers in the Super Bowl February 11th in Las Vegas. The 49ers held on for a 3-point win over Detroit to claim the NFC title. Students and alumni at Florida A&M finally have a new head football coach after a month-long search. Assistant coach James Cozy was promoted to take over the HBCU program. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you say you care about the community, you have to also care about the climate. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we've got your black.
Progressive Insurance is making it easy to save money. When you bundle your auto policy with home, condo, or renters, you'll earn a multi-policy discount. Easy to bundle, easy to save. Visit Progressive.com. That's Progressive.com.
We all agree that America has a very serious problem.
Okay, KBLA delegation, we need your help as we launch our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We would deeply appreciate you going to our KBLA 1580 website and filling out a short climate justice survey, which will help us better serve our beloved community as we build out this campaign. It'll take you just a few short minutes to complete the online survey, and the information you provide us will be invaluable as we do our part to hold folk accountable and amplify the voices of our people in this climate conversation. When you take the survey, you'll be automatically entered to win seats at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. So, hit our website at KBLA 1580. Help us out by taking the short climate justice campaign survey, and you could be our guest at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Thursday, February 29th. Thank you in advance for your consideration and cooperation. At KBLA Talk 1580, we care about the community, we care about the climate.
She's so smooth. So I'm interrupting my own shower to remind you to treat your skin like the queen she is with Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash, packed with Olay's highest level of vitamin B3 complex. It's so moisturizing that it will give you visibly smoother, head-turning skin in just 14 days. People wondering, how'd she get so smooth? Olay Hyaluronic Body Wash. Also, try Olay Hyaluronic Body Lotion.
On your period, sudden gushes happen without warning. But now, you can say goodbye to stand-up gush fears, thanks to Always Ultra Thins with rapid dry technology. It absorbs gushes 2 times faster than the leading store brand and gives you up to 100% leak-free protection. Hello, clean and comfortable with Always Fear No Gush.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
More of Mark Lamont Hill coming your way right about now. In case you've just tuned in, we were talking in this hour about a number of things, but we started this hour talking about the big news on Friday when the ICJ, the UN's highest court, came out with a decision telling Israel to not engage in genocide, but stopping short of calling for a ceasefire. That's been parsed a variety of ways over the weekend. And we wanted to get to it first thing today with Mark Lamont Hill, I guess, in this hour, author, activist, scholar, journalist, host of his own YouTube channel, just a brilliant brother, trying to help us unpack what this UN High Court said on Friday, again, telling Israel no genocide. And by the way, these are the things that constitute what genocide is, but stopping short of calling for a ceasefire. This case, once again, in case you just tuned in, this case was brought by South Africa. And we spent some time in the first part of this conversation with Mark Lamont Hill talking about what it means that a nation like South Africa would be the one country in the entire world to bring this case to the ICJ. There was a lot to unpack there. If you missed any part of this conversation, you can always check out the podcast. But Mark's response breaking down why South Africa was absolutely brilliant. And I recommend you check out the podcast if you missed that part of the conversation. So the flip side of all that is that the UN is also in a bit of trouble because Israel has accused or said publicly that there were a number of UN workers who participated in the October 7th surprise attack on Israel, the Hamas attack. There were UN workers who participated in that. So it's been a little messy for the UN for the last few days. Germany, the United States, and other countries have sided with Israel on that intelligence. And so there's a move now to cut off funding for the organization, for the entity where these persons apparently worked with and for the UN when they were involved in this attack on October 7th. And Mark, you were drawing a parallel. I'll let you finish your parallel.
Yeah, it's two pieces to it. The first piece is just what it means to work for them. Again, the UN does a lot of on-the-ground stuff. On election day, I'm sure in LA, if it's like it is in Philadelphia, there are people who do poll work, who are poll workers,
Mm-hmm.
who show up and who stand there and hand you the card and tell you who you should be voting for.
Mm-hmm.
If one of them was selling drugs, the Republicans could put on the news Democratic, members of the DNC caught selling drugs. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
There's a way that you can make something that is very tangential or people who have a very limited role sound like they are central to the organization. I don't doubt that there could be corruption inside of UNRWA. Like every organization, there's corruption. There's mistakes. I don't know if these allegations are true or not, but if they are, it's still 12 people as an organization on the ground that has 30,000. And I think we all know, from history's sake, that Israel would not underestimate or understate how many people were involved. So It ain't like there's another 200 that they just being polite about.
Mm-hmm.
If they say it's 12, it's like spades. It might be 4 and a possible. And if that's the case, then I don't understand why 30,000 is enough. Why 4 out of 30,000 is enough to do the response. But the second piece of it is they talk about the affiliation and the connection of people to Hamas. And again, the problem is we conflate Hamas as this armed terrorist wing. Or rather, we only focus on that and ignore the fact that Hamas is also the government. So, for example, over 100 journalists have been killed in Gaza since October 7th, which is, is horrific. It's unthinkable. And sometimes when they get killed, they say, well, they have Hamas ties, and the Hamas tie might be they work for a state-owned radio station. But they can say, oh, they got hired by Hamas, or a person. They say a lot of the doctors are Hamas connected, and it's like, well, the doctor was appointed. The hospital it's a government hospital, so technically the whole hospital you could say has a connection to Hamas, but you can't just go blowing up hospitals. And then they're saying that people have terrorist affiliations, and this is the one that I was saying before the break that I think is really important, because affiliations could mean your cousin, your brother, your friend, somebody in your house, somebody up the street. You could have went to a restaurant that was owned by somebody who's sympathetic to Hamas, and all you did was go in there and get some hummus, and now they're saying you're part of Hamas. You know what I'm saying? And we saw this actually in California, as I'm thinking about it, when they were talking about doing civil injunctions against gangs and starting to try and lock people up and putting them on a gang list because they were affiliated with gangs. And a lot of time it could be that you waved to your cousin up the street who was a Crip, or you know somebody who did this. I mean, if we were to lock up or even be suspicious of any black person in Los Angeles, for example, who got a family member that's in a gang, or has a friend who was in a gang.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
No,
I mean, we'd be locking everybody up.
No, I take your point. I'm laughing to myself because if eating hummus makes you Hamas associated, I'm in trouble, man. Because I was eating some hummus yesterday, so I take your point. That'd be a problem, a real problem. I'm also laughing because I'm thinking about your brilliant point, and I'm thinking about I'm a follower, as many of us are, of that first century Palestinian Jew named Jesus. And I was just telling somebody the other day that Jesus had 12 disciples. Let's run the list, shall we? Judas sold him out. Peter denied him. Thomas doubted him. I'm going to stop right there. I tell folk all the time, if you get 12 Negroes together, 3 or 4 may no good. Just know that. Because if Jesus had 12 disciples and 3 or 4 of them wasn't no good, you know if you get 12 people anywhere you get 12 people assembled, 4 or 5 of them ain't no good. Just trust and believe on that, because you ain't going to do better than Jesus did. And he handpicked his 12 disciples, and 3 or 4 of them turned on him anyway. So Mark's point is well taken. You get 30,000 people in an organization, somebody ain't going to do right. I digress on that point. Mark don't need my help. I just thought it was funny, and so I thought I'd add that. Let me get serious again for a moment here, because what is no joking matter is this humanitarian calamity in Gaza right now. There's a hunger crisis, and people are starving. People are dying. There are people who are now eating animal feed to survive. The food is not getting in because of the Israeli blockade. In fact, there are Israeli protesters. I mean, let me just give you their side of this as well. The Israeli protesters are in part unapologetically blocking entrance for some of this stuff to come through, some of the goods and foods and services. They're blocking it because their argument is that we shouldn't let no food in, or anything else in, for that matter, until they let the hostages come out. And so you got a crisis here, and that's both sides of it. Mark Lamont Hill.
You know, first of all, I support the release of all hostages, and I think it's important to note that the court also demanded the release of all hostages as an emergency measure. They said that Hamas should release all Israeli civilians. It's one thing to capture military folk. Those are political prisoners. Those are captured soldiers. Those are, but when you just capture innocent people, that's a war crime. And so I support the release of all people. But the idea of saying that we're going to block humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip until these 100 people come home, or these 200 people, or however many people come home, is one. I don't support that morally, but also I don't support it legally. Legally, it's collective punishment, and you cannot punish a group of people for the actions of a small number. That's one of the reasons why Israel is being accused of war crimes, and you may see them in the ICC just as soon as you see them in the ICJ. Because you can't cut off electricity and water and fuel to everybody because you don't like what Hamas did. And that's similarly what's happening when the people are blocking the road. But I understand their pain and I understand their frustration.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm less because I don't know what I would do if somebody took one of my children. Yeah. You know what I mean? I might be on the border too.
Sure.
But the government has a different responsibility.
Yeah.
And they have effectively blocked most of the UN aid that's come. They've denied people security assurances and security clearances to get in. So they've said, look, we can't promise it's safe. And then others have just been blocked or obstructed or turned around. Others have been destroyed because of the fighting and the air raids. And so what you have right now, as you pointed out, are Palestinians who are literally eating out of the rubble. Mm-hmm. The very same rubble where probably 8,000 people and maybe 1,000 children are under there as well. Mm-hmm. And so now people are being forced to eat anything they can because there's no food, there's no water coming in. And 1.7 million out of the 2.2 million people of Gaza are homeless. They're unhoused right now, and they've been completely, and their homes have been destroyed.
Yep. I am not suggesting, watching my time here, I am not suggesting that Israel is engaged in this, but Mark knows full well, maybe we have a minute or two to talk about it as we move forward. I want to cover 2 or 3 other issues before I lose them at the top of the hour. But this food shortage is because of the blockade, as I said, and you've heard both sides of it. But civilian starvation is a military tactic. It's been done for years on end. Civilian starvation as a military tactic. It was stopped. It was supposed to be abridged back in 1998 on the world stage, but some people are still using it as a military tactic. Not saying Israel's doing that, but just trust and believe that there have been many wars fought where people were starved to death as a military tactic. I digress on that more with Mark Lamont here when we come forward.
This is getting good. Yeah, man. Tavis Smiley continues when we come forward.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we do Black history every single day. In fact, as the only Black talk radio station west of the Mississippi, we are Black history. Our annual Black History Month luncheon is fast approaching, and we want to be sure to give you ample time to get your company, organization, church, or group to join us at this year's celebration on the last day of the month, Thursday, February 29th at noon. Last year, we honored iconic local Black media personalities, including Pat Harvey, Jim Hill, Mark Brown, Beverly White, Sandy Banks, and Pat Prescott, and raised $20,000 in scholarships. This year, we're honoring Black Hollywood creatives who have used their artistic genius as climate justice champions. At this year's luncheon, we will be showcasing and sharing their inspiring work on our big screen. Plus, a scrumptious meal, live music, great company, and lots of fun with your favorite KBLA Talk 1580 hosts. So contact us today at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. That's info@smileyAudiomedia.com or call 323-290-4690. We hope to see you Thursday, February 29th as we close out Black History Month. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean. Of course I use Mr. Clean Magic Eraser to clean tough messes off my stovetop and bathtub. But then I discovered I can also use it to easily clean my patio furniture and even my shoes. I'm hooked.
And when wipes won't cut it, I use Magic Eraser Sheets. They're thin and flexible erasers, perfect for everyday messes, like gunk on my counters and sinks. They really are magical.
The reviews are in. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and Sheets make cleaning look easy.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
I got to move off of this given the time that is getting limited here, but we were just talking about civilian starvation as a military tactic. One of our listeners responds, Tavis, the Irish famine was a man-made tactic by the British, which is why we Irish call it a genocide. Just making the point that it's been done many times in years past. Let me pivot right quick, Mark Lamont Hill, to cover a couple of things before I lose you here at the top of the hour. I mentioned earlier that 3 U.S. soldiers were killed in Jordan in a drone attack that the U.S. says was launched by an Iran-backed militia. There are concerns that we're going to get pulled into a wider war. President Biden said, as you expected he would, that we will respond in due time. In our own way, we will respond. And people are getting more concerned today that we may get pulled into a wider war. Your thoughts?
I think that we will undoubtedly get pulled in. We're already pulled in. You know, we saw in the Red Sea for the last month, if not longer, Ansar Allah, or also known as Houthis, in the Red Sea, saying, look, we're going to block this sea and attack ships until the ceasefire happens in Gaza. Joe Biden is bombing the Red Sea, bombing the Houthis in the Red Sea. Iran is supporting that. Not the U.S., but supporting the Houthis. They're also supporting Hezbollah in the northern part of Israel, where we see fighting at the border near the Golan. And then we have now, as you pointed out, at the Jordan-Syria border. So we're seeing war and we're seeing proxy wars. And this only advantages, I think, to a large extent, Israel's interest. Now, obviously, Israel doesn't want to be attacked. No one wants to be attacked.
Sure.
But they've also been waiting for excuses. They've been waiting for a reason, and Netanyahu's been very public about this. This isn't my opinion. Netanyahu's just waiting for Iran to give him a reason. And what we're seeing at the border from the Islamic Resistance in Iraq, which is the name of the group, it's like an umbrella organization. The Islamic Resistance in Iraq is an Iran-backed armed group. And so, again, if everybody says, well, Iran's fingerprints are on all of these things and they're potentially training and providing weapons to Hamas, then, now they can justify attacking Iran, which is what Israel has wanted. And that means if Israel's at war, the U.S. is at war. And so what started off as a bomb on October 7th or an attack on October 7th could turn into a full-scale regional war that extends in multiple parts, not just of historic Palestine, but of the Middle East.
Well, the U.S. is getting pulled into this. You read President Biden's comments. He is going to respond. He'll respond, as he said, paraphrasing, in his own time and in his own way. But trust and believe there will be a response, a U.S. response to these 3 soldiers being killed in Jordan over the last couple of days, over the weekend. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Mark Lamont Hill, huge story today in the New York Times. Check it out for yourself. About a coalition of black faith leaders. Everybody's in this article. Tim McDonald is in it. Cynthia Hale is in it. Jamal Bryant is in it. All kinds of folk whose names you know are in this article today with these hundreds of black faith leaders who are demanding a ceasefire right now. And some saying that if they don't, if the president doesn't call for a ceasefire, they will deny him speaking in their churches as he campaigns, and not just him, but other Democrats as well. It's getting funky, as one might say. We'll talk about it with Mark Lamont Hill when we come forward.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Stay Housed LA has the resources you need to know your rights and the legal support to back them up. The COVID-19 pandemic has cost people their jobs and livelihoods. This has left an estimated 1/3 of households not being able to make rent and facing losing their homes. This is a fear no one in our community should have to face. You have rights, though, and Stay Housed LA is here to help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between the County of Los Angeles, the City of Los Angeles, and local community and legal service providers. Together, they provide tenants with the information and support needed to exercise their rights so they can remain safely in their homes. Find out more about your rights by participating in a virtual tenant workshop. Get the legal assistance you need. Find additional resources in Los Angeles County and the City of Los Angeles. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA County for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. Stay connected to Stay Housed LA for updates. This and more at stayhousedla.org. That's stayhousedla.org. Or call their hotline at 213-694-0040. We've got your black with a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Even easier than choosing Charles Barkley in a pickup game.
We'll take Barkley.
Ha! First pick. Sorry, kids.
Yep, even easier than that. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision?
Okay, here's the plan. Pass me the ball every time.
This is banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One N.A. member FDIC.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
This is Mark Lamont Hill on Tavis Smiley. Got 4 minutes left, Mark. I'll give it to you right quick here. These black faith leaders are stepping up their pressure on President Biden for a ceasefire. He's campaigning hard in the black community. South Carolina, first up on the docket. But these black faith leaders are saying no ceasefire, no access to our churches. They're being pushed, as they say, by their parishioners. And I'm talking about black folk all across this country.
I think it's a beautiful sight. Again, as black people at our best. We're concerned with our own community. We're concerned with our own well-being. We want to make sure that we got food, clothing, and shelter. We want to make sure our schools are strong. We want to make sure that we're not getting terrorized by police. But we also understand that we have a duty to the broader community and to the broader world. And as black Christian leaders, they're saying we got to think about the least of these. And at this moment, there's in Gaza right now, 1 out of 100 children in Gaza has been killed since October 7th. 1% of the child population has been eliminated in Gaza. Now, we can quibble over the word genocide or not, but what I know is 1% of any group's babies dying is a tragedy, and it's a sin. And these church leaders are leveraging their power. They're saying, look, Joe, Mr. President, we're not going to just hand you our vote. There has to be something at stake. We won't refuse to be a captured electorate. You're not just going to take our vote because we ain't got no other choice. No, we're going to make you do something. And not just the easy stuff, not just patting us on our head and telling us that you're going to, put some money in the schools and come in our church and smile with us. No. We want you to have a ceasefire. We want you to make the morally correct decision, even though it's difficult. And since you're so in debt to us, you're so accountable to us, allegedly, because we make you president and we can unmake you president, then you have to do some different stuff, and that's what I'm happy to see.
Yeah. I got a minute here. I don't know how this is going to play out. On the one hand, it's clear from the data that he is in some trouble given the way he has stewarded or not this drama in the Middle East.
Yes, Lord.
He's in some trouble on that politically. No question about that. On the one hand. On the other hand, nobody wants Trump. So I don't know how that plays itself out. Any thoughts on that? I mean, people can press him on this issue, but what Joe Biden knows between me and you, he ain't gonna say it. What he's thinking is, they ain't gonna vote for Trump over me.
And he right. But what he don't know is a whole lot of us telling us to stay home.
Yeah.
And he's gonna have a bunch of disaffected, uninterested, unenthused voters. You saw in Dearborn, Michigan, the Arabs in Michigan said, "Don't even come. Ain't nothing you can say to us is gonna make this make sense.
Don't even show up." Yeah.
Don't even show up.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the attitude. I actually think he's right. I don't think these black folk gonna vote Trump unless they already was. The problem is they might not. They're not gonna get their grandbabies out. They're not getting the church van to pick everybody up. They're not getting that cousin that'll vote if you make them, but he ain't gonna just get off the couch himself. That's what you got to worry about.
Yep. It's always fire when MLH shows up, Mark Lamont Hill, and I'm always delighted to have him on this program. Mark, I'll talk to you soon. Stay strong until we connect again, brother.
Yes, sir. Love you, my brother.
Love you back. Nothing you can do about it. More Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Moore. Here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Iran is denying any involvement in the attack on a U.S. outpost in Jordan that killed 3 American service members. An Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman told state media the various groups backed by Tehran in the Middle East do not take direct orders from Iran. Officials claim Tehran had no link or connection to the